this capacity, I am the chair of the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee, known as CPL. We have received one petition, no questions and no statement from members of the public for today's meetings, and I'm going to deal with those at item 5. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other equipment are switched to silent mode, and I'm going to do that right now just to make sure. So not as to disturb people during the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there's an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from Town Hall staff, so many people on either side of me, and the assembly point is in Tudor Square. Now, I'd like to ask all the policy committee members to introduce themselves in turn. I'm going to start on the my left-hand side.
Good morning, I'm Marion Elliott, Green Councillor for Gleaders Valley.
Good morning, Zahira Naz, Councillor for the Dartnell Ward and spokesperson for the Labour Group.
Good morning, Sophia Said, Labour Councillor for Burngreave.
Good morning, Councillor Joe Otton, Member for Dawn Totley and Group spokesperson for Liberal Democrats.
It's Joel McGuigan, Councillor for Mosborough Ward and Reform UK.
Right, thank you very much, folks. Excuse me. So item 1, apologies for absence. We have apologies for absence. None recorded. I'm going to rattle on through this. Item 2, exclusion of the public and press. And I have information that there are no items that contain exempt information. Item 3 is declarations of interest. So is there anything on the agenda which members wish to declare is of interest? No hands raised, so no declarations of interest. Item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. Now, I don't think I have a copy of those printed off. Thank you. Well, I did read them earlier. So, what I tend to do on this is to go page by page. They are numbered aside from the first page. But the meeting was held on the 23rd of March, 2026. Page 1. Any issues with that? Any typos or errors of fact? Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. And the final, page 7. Right. And I sign that. Is that correct, Amanda? I'll do that later. Okay. So item 5. So as mentioned, we've received one petition from a member of the public for today's meeting. So, there's a maximum of 30 minutes for this item, and I'm going to invite the petitioner to present the petition. You've got 3 minutes for the petition presentation. So, welcome to the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, working. The situation with amplified noise in our city centre keeps getting worse. Walking through our main shopping streets is often a horrible experience, sometimes with several different groups shouting at you, or even playing pre-recorded messages shouting at you at ear-splitting volumes. This continues through the day and sometimes past midnight, keeping city centre residents awake. This behaviour is not at all reasonable in the first place, so won't be solved by a voluntary agreement. Those with power need to put something in place to make it fair for all of us. A petition from the national organisation Unity UK was recently presented to Sheffield Council. The presenter stated that there was no evidence that noise from preachers was keeping people away, but that's not true. Our local grassroots petition against amplified noise that I'm presenting today has 253 signatories, all signing that they are indeed being driven away from our city centre. For those of us like me who have to go there to work, the constant noise adds a layer of stress to every day. We can usually hear more than one thing going on at a time, and the fact they're both amplified just makes the combination horrendous. I do think the more is great, and speaking personally, I don't mind that the soundtrack when walking through is sometimes being called a sinner on one side and having karaoke singing on the other side, but I do think if it was quieter, it feels like it would just be fairer to everybody. This petition is really not concerned with banning preaching or busking, and honestly, there are some amazing buskers, and I'm always very relieved when it's one of them while I'm at work. But there's no reason to use amplifiers for preaching. These are quiet pedestrian streets, and we can hear each other just fine without speakers. It also doesn't feel that good for the community as a whole, and you do see people having rows and getting quite agitated when they're being shouted at very high volumes while just going about their day. Cities such as Leicester have developed a fair response to the recent availability of these low-cost and loud battery-powered speakers. Via PSPO, the council have stopped all use of amplified sound equipment apart from pre-authorised events and performers. If people want to be amplified, they're now able to pre-book pitches via an application, but it didn't stop people continuing to do their thing without amplification if they want to, which seems like a reasonable compromise. A system like this upholds everyone's human rights. People continue to preach in Leicester city centre as they did before, just not using amplified speakers. This is a great balance, and we strongly urge Sheffield Council to implement the same model as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray. Have you switched it off? Excellent. Thank you. So thank you for the petition. Sheffield City Council welcomes activities that enhance the experience of visitors to Sheffield City Centre. Busking and street performing, as you mentioned, can provide an important platform for artists, adding colour, vibrancy and atmosphere to the city's streets. Article 9 and 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights, as enacted through the Human Rights Act 1998, protects freedom of thought, conscience and religion, and the freedom of expression. So street preaching is a lawful activity and forms part of the tradition of free speech in public space. However, busking, street performance and amplified preaching can sometimes lead to complaints, as you've outlined, particularly in relation to excessive noise or obstruction of public spaces. So these cause annoyance and disturbance to visitors, to residents and to businesses. So the council is working on codes of practice for busking and street performance and for street preaching that will guide best practice. And the council will involve key partners and interested parties. So, for example, I've already spoken to Alex, who's put the petition forward, and Alex and the group will be involved in that. But it will be a voluntary code of practice, so we will see how that goes. The code will include guidance on being respectful to others by maintaining a reasonable volume, moving location regularly, and ensuring any equipment does not create an obstruction on the street. If complaints are received, officers will provide advice and may ask that the volume is reduced or to move location. Now, as for putting forward your concerns, I've asked that an email address is provided. So we've got an email address here, and people can report concerns about excessive noise or antisocial behaviour via asb@sheffield.gov.uk. That's asb@sheffield.gov.uk. I'm interested to know about Leicester's amplification policy. So can I ask officers that we can have a look at that, explore it? Can you pass that on to the officers who are working on this? Okay. So thank you very much, Ray. I'm afraid that's fine. That's what the guidance allows. Yes, thank you for your introduction. Is this normal procedure? It isn't, is it?
It's not open to debate.
It's not open to debate, I'm afraid, Joe. So item 6 follows. Now this is members' questions. So I'm going to give Joe a few seconds to get back to his chair if he wants to be involved in the members' questions. Okay. So 2 questions have been received from Councillor Joe Otten. A written response has been sent to the questioner and published on the Council's website. So Councillor Otten, would you like to ask a supplementary question on either of those?
Thank you. Yes, so question 1 relates to King Edward Swimming Pool, which I'm sure we're all aware of. Certainly you and I, Brian, we've probably personal experience of the use of that pool, particularly with swimming lessons. I appreciate from the answer that the importance of the pool is understood. Also, from the report we're receiving later this morning, describes the pool as strategically important and also talks about, there's a recommendation to maintain current levels of swimming provision. So I suppose my question is, have we gone against what that paper says before we've even had the chance to consider it?
Well, I hope we haven't gone against the spirit of the paper or in the material effects of the paper. It's very disappointing that the Trust have had to close the facilities, and it's the Trust decision to do that. All the information I've been provided with that it is not practical to reopen the pool until there's a huge amount of investment can be sourced to be able to do that. It's not safe to open the pool. That's kind of the top and bottom of it. In your answer, you've had the explanation that we're providing alternative arrangement for school swimming sessions and support provided to help clubs to relocate. And swimming lesson customers have been signposted to other facilities. So the council have said they're going to take a citywide approach to leisure investment, which is coming up in the programme later, and to swimming provision, including future opportunities to increase swimming capacity across Sheffield. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So question 2, supplementary. So again, thank you for your answer on that. I welcome the support for the Float to Live campaign. As a member of the Fire Authority, I'm obviously aware of their leading role in that and support that. I suppose more generally, the question on water safety and water safety advice, there are particular hazards, aren't there, particularly with young and inexperienced people, sometimes intoxicated, getting into water and not understanding the risks in advance. And do you agree with me that the quality of advice on the risks is lacking in a number of respects? I think, so for example, Yorkshire Water just say don't do it, and they have a list, they can say don't do it because X, Y and Z. Some of which are reasonable grounds, and some of which, and some of which can be reasonably mitigated with sufficient knowledge and experience. And an approach to water safety advice that isn't just don't do it, but is these are the risks and these is how you can overcome them and these are the process. Do you think that would be more beneficial, given that people are going to get in the water?
Yeah, I think it's very important that this information gets out. So one of the angles that I've been taking, so I have some open water in my ward, so at Crooks Valley Park, which is well used by the wild swimmers. Often people turn up in groups, which is a safety aspect. That's great, I'm glad that happens. What I am keen on is making sure that there are water safety days. So each June we have a water safety day at Crooks Valley Park, where the fire service, fire and rescue service, and a number of other organisations are included to come along, and safety measures are demonstrated actively in the water. You know, how to throw a rope out, that kind of issue. So I would encourage everyone who's got open water within their ward to put some resource into doing that, because Fire and Rescue Service, I know, are very keen on that happening. So that would be my recommendation there. Thank you, Joe. Right, we're going to move on to item 7, which is the work programme. So this is on pages 21 to 25 of the large pack. And for the work programme, the presenting officer is Amanda Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. This work programme is a work in progress at the moment. This is a new committee. This is a new start of the new municipal year. We have had one work programming session so far, but we are expecting another one. And once that is complete, then you will start to see the work programme populate more, and lots more items go on there. So it is in its early stages at this point in time. I just want to draw your attention to the referral that we had from the June council meeting. I have listed the issue on there to be considered at our next policy development and forward planning meeting, which will allow the chair to then provide a steer, and we will bring that to the next committee meeting for approval. And that is all I have to note, unless officers want to add anything at this stage.
Has anyone got any comments? My comment is that the work programme needs populating. There's large areas which haven't been filled in yet, but the reason is the second of our large-scale explorations of what can go on there haven't happened yet. So the second review will be able to help with that, and it will be added as soon as possible. Yeah, as soon as practical, certainly. Right, so if there are any comments on the work programme? Yeah, thank you, Joe. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I've got a couple of suggestions. Actually, I've got a third suggestion, which is not really a suggestion for the work programme. Just because we're expected to read these on our screens now rather than getting paper copies, can we have it in a portrait format? Because the text is absolutely tiny in landscape. If it's going to be in landscape, I'd like paper copies, please, because my eyes are not what they used to be. So, substantive suggestions. Firstly, in response to the petition, I would have said this a moment ago if you'd let me. I was surprised that the answer didn't say this is something that we could consider adding to the PSPO, because the PSPO would give us powers to limit amplified, the use of amplification in the city centre, in a proportionate way, without impinging on anybody's right to. People have a right to speak, but they don't have a right to an arbitrary level of volume, do they? And the provisions you're talking about are things like guidance and best practice, which are voluntary, aren't they? If somebody wants to make a lot of noise, they can. And the limitations, if we don't have a PSPO, are the kind of environmental health levels of noise, which would be, quite severe for what is meant to be an attractive public space. So can I ask, my answer number one is that you look at putting amplification in the PSPO. And if you'd like to respond to that, then I've got a second suggestion.
Yes, thank you, Joe, Councillor Orton. I believe a stage-by-stage process is really necessary here. We need to be finding out what the issues are, gathering data, gathering information, and it requires a soft touch, as far as I'm concerned, at this stage. And if it requires anything more, then we can take that as we come. Thank you.
Well, this has been known for some years, so I think that's. I'm quite appalled at that, I've got to say. Okay, suggestion number two. Yes, can we have a piece of work on the quality of support that is available to volunteer libraries. I know, speaking in my ward, the Totley Library, absolutely excellent. Volunteers do an absolutely smashing job. But I have less knowledge of libraries, volunteer libraries in other wards. But I have been approached with a concern that there is insufficient support, professional support for volunteer libraries, and can we have a look at what is available? Particularly, it's been raised with me, is whether volunteer libraries are supported to engage in things like Pride and Black History Month, the sorts of things that kind of civic libraries will naturally do, because they're part of the system, part of the culture of it. Is that support available to voluntary libraries? Can we have a piece of work that looks at that, please?
So you've kind of preempted what I was going to offer, which was that all the committee here get a briefing on volunteer libraries. And I think that's really critical that members know what volunteer libraries produce, the support, and have an opportunity to raise these kind of questions and concerns that they may have. So I think that's necessary. I don't think it needs a piece of work on the agenda yet. I want all of us to be aware initially of what volunteer libraries do, because I don't think that knowledge has permeated through all members. Was there any more comments? Is that it? Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your supplementaries there, Councillor Otten. So just to round off on the work programme, it's going to be presented to committee for review, and that will then go forward onto the next agenda in September. Yeah. Item 8. So this is a presenting item. So is it Jane? Yeah, okay. So the final budget outturn, quarter 4, for 25-26, is going to be reported on here, and Jane will be doing that. When you're ready, Joe. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and this paper has been presented to the Finance and Performance Committee in June initially, and it's basically been presented to every other policy committee as part of the standard budget monitoring framework. So the 25-26 full year outturn position, well, the starting point is that the Council finished the year with an 11.1 million overspend, which is less than 2% of the Council's net revenue budget. So this is still a significant pressure, but an improvement when we compare it to earlier in the year and the last 2 years. The forecast was 18.9 million at quarter 3 and 34.7 million last year. So we are moving in the right direction. The improvements are a result of the strong action taken across the Council, closer control of spending, recruitment and vacancy management, and better tracking of the position, particularly in the final part of the year. However, it is important to be clear that this doesn't mean the problems have gone away. The same areas are still under pressure, particularly social care, children's services, SEND and housing, where demand is higher and costs are greater than our budget allows. The 11.1 million overspend will be funded from reserves. This has helped us manage the position this year, but it's not something we can continue to rely on, and it's a key reason why we need to keep a strong focus on financial discipline. In terms of what's driving the position, adult social care remains the biggest pressure at 30 million overspend due to the number of people needing care and the cost of that care. Children's services continues to face pressure, particularly from high-cost placements and support for children with more complex needs. SEND transport has improved significantly during the year, but with the overspend reducing as a result of practical changes such as more shared transport, travel training and better decision-making. So turning to the Communities, Parks and Leisure budgets, the committee finished the year with a 1.9 million underspend on a net revenue budget of 38 million. The positive position is mainly as a result of vacancy management and salary savings across a number of services, including community prevention, business improvement, community safety, youth services and Parks and Countryside. Parks and Countryside also benefited from additional income during the year. The underspends more than offset the pressure within bereavement services, where reduced income from changing patterns of service resulted in a £300,000 overspend. All the committee's planned savings for the year were delivered, and services continued to carefully manage their staffing and discretionary expenditure throughout the year. So overall, this represents another strong year's financial performance for the committee, with services remaining within budget whilst continuing to deliver priorities across communities, parks and leisure. So to summarise, the final position is better than expected and better than previous years. The improvement is due to strong action taken during the year and some funding that we set aside earlier being released. But the underlying pressures remain, particularly in social care, SEND and housing. We have used reserves to manage the position this year, and that's not sustainable. So going forward, the focus has to be on managing demand, improving value for money and delivering the changes set out in the Future Sheffield programme, which is key to creating a more sustainable financial position. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Jane. So are there any questions for Jane Wilby? Okay, well, thank you very much for the report, Jane. I need to ask now whether, are we all agreed on the report? It sounds like without people asking for questions, that there is agreement. If any member wishes to dissent from that, please raise your hand. No. I think the report is agreed. Thank you. Item 9 is the large report we have here. So that can be found on pages 55 to 483. I believe it's divided into 3 sections. So this is the Sport and Leisure Built Facilities Strategy 2026 to 39. That's a long period. So I will read out my section if you want to get yourself settled in. Yeah. So the officers are going to get settled in. So committee is being asked to approve adoption of the Sport and Leisure Built Facilities Strategy 26 to 39 and to note the content. It's important to say that this is an evidence-based strategic framework for future decisions and investment. It's not approval for a capital programme or for individual projects. The report brings forward Sheffield's Sport and Leisure Built Facilities Strategy for the period noted. The strategy provides a citywide framework for some future investment, for planning and for partnership, which are all really key elements, working across sport and leisure facilities. It's not solely a Sheffield City Council strategy or policy. It's a strategy for Sheffield's built sport and leisure infrastructure, covering facilities across the whole city, regardless of ownership or operator. There's a mix there. So it includes Sheffield City Council-owned facilities, community-owned and community-operated facilities. It also includes facilities owned and managed by trusts, education and university provision, voluntary sector facilities, and privately owned and operated sport and leisure facilities. So you can see why it's such a large and expansive document. Okay. Right, I'm going to leave it at that and let the officers continue if needs be. So if you can introduce yourselves, who's going to lead?
Hello, I'm Kate Clark, Service Manager for Sport and Leisure. I'm going to lead the presentation, and I've just got 2 colleagues with me as well to answer any questions.
Catherine Mudge, Service Manager, Sport, Leisure and Events team.
Hello, I'm Thea. I'm a project officer in Sport and Leisure.
Okay, we've got some slides. Are you okay to move through them, Amanda? Oh, sorry. Right, I think you've summarised some of this in just what you've talked about, Brian. But just to kind of reiterate, the strategy is providing a citywide evidence base and framework for future investment, which will allow us to plan and work in partnership across the city to prioritise and invest in indoor and outdoor built sport and leisure facilities. There's a number of reasons why we need this strategy and why it's really important for us to adopt this. Partly that it supports our council ambitions to deliver in modern, welcoming, inclusive and accessible facilities. That sits under our sport and leisure strategy ambitions to invest in an active Sheffield. It also supports our move more physical activity strategy ambitions to improve access and participation, but also to improve health and well-being outcomes across the city and reduce health inequalities. It provides a really useful evidence base to support the local planning authority in making decisions in relation to sport and leisure recreational needs and new provision, but it also supports the local authority and partners in making external funding applications, and it's a strategy that's been asked for by Sport England for us to be able to access Sport England capital funding for investment in facilities across the city. So broadly, it ensures appropriate level of provision to continue to meet the needs of Sheffield now and into the future, so it considers population growth up to 2039, as Brian mentioned. Could you move to the next slide? Thank you. Just to give a little bit more information on scope, it includes both indoor and outdoor built facilities. So the indoor built facilities, that broadly considers things like swimming pools, sports halls, diving, health and fitness, athletics, squash, ice sports, and also considers outdoor built facilities such as tennis, paddle, wheeled sports, multi-use games areas and athletics and golf. So lots of those outdoor facilities sit in our parks and green spaces, so we've worked closely with Parks and Countryside colleagues on the development of this strategy as well. It covers, as you said, a range of facilities, not just in our ownership, and it covers all facilities within Sheffield City Council's boundary and within the planning authority. It considers as well imported and exported demand from neighbouring authorities, and they've been involved in the consultation process. One key kind of thing to say is it does exclude grass and artificial pitches for football, hockey, cricket and rugby, as these are covered by a playing pitch strategy. We do currently have a playing pitch strategy, but it's due for renewal and will be adopted in September 2026, or brought to committee for adoption there. In terms of developing the strategy, we've used the Sport England Assessments of Needs and Opportunities guidance, which enables us to create a strategy that meets National Planning Policy Framework guide requirements to produce a robust evidence base for decision making. It's been informed by a number of different items, including Sport England facilities planning modelling, which has helped us map supply and demand across swimming pools and sports halls. We've carried out with our consultant Strategic Leisure Limited quality audits across spaces in the city. We've mapped these onto GIS to ensure we've got a good picture of what we have across the city, and also carried out consultation with a range of partners, including sports national governing bodies and operators. We've also had that strategy development overseen by a broad steering group with different council departments and partners across the city, including universities, National Centre for Sport and Exercise Medicine, Yorkshire Sport Foundation and Sport England also sat on that steering group. So as a result, you've got a huge document within the agenda pack. The Stage B report there is the evidence base, which is a result of all that work done in terms of mapping the city, and the Stage C report, which analyses that evidence and then provides recommendations and an action plan. The strategy's broadly found that we have sufficient facilities across the city to meet current demand, but it has highlighted that there is pressures at peak times and that a lot of our facilities are ageing, which we knew already from a lot of the work we've done as part of the leisure review and leisure investment programme. So one of the key strategic recommendations it makes is around replacing, refurbishing and modernising ageing leisure centres and core facilities, particularly those that have swimming pools and sports halls. It also recommends kind of broadly improving access and capacity, particularly where participation is lowest. So that looks at things like increasing opening hours, looking at programming, and also kind of working with education facilities to facilitate more access to some of those facilities in the city, because we know community access to some of those facilities isn't as good as it could be. Another key recommendation is around supporting a much broader facility mix that doesn't just think about our leisure centres, but also looks at it, kind of protecting and maintaining our community halls, parks, hubs, including more informal activity spaces such as multi-use games areas, to ensure we've got that mix of facilities that meet kind of the community's needs and provide a kind of variety of accessible spaces and at different cost and free to access. And I think the kind of overriding recommendation really is to just embed sustainability and inclusion in all of that development work we do, and work closely with partners across the city to make the best use of those facilities we do have. If you could move to the next slide. The strategy stage C action plan goes into quite a lot of detail in terms of the facilities across the city. I've highlighted some kind of key points here on the slide, and I'll just talk through them. Within the document and within the action plan, there is a lot more detail in kind of sites that are prioritised, and more detail in terms of the recommendations under those areas. So it makes facility recommendations rather than for specific sports. Some sports that perhaps aren't mentioned in these key facility recommendations are because they are kind of within the sports halls that those sports take place, or they take place within multi-use games areas. So things like basketball and netball are kind of sit under those facilities. So in terms of swimming pools for the city, additional water space at Springs is a particular recommendation, and we are adding a teaching pool as we build Springs Leisure Centre, which is due on site later this year, so that will help contribute to that recommendation. Also, new water space at both Concord and University Goodwin. Potentially reconfiguration of some of the water space at Ponds Forge to increase the capacity for swimming lessons. As we know from our modelling and from kind of consultation we've done across the city, swimming is a really key aspect for people, particularly access to swimming lessons. And that also talks about refurbishment of some of our community venues and smaller venues, including Zest and Hillsborough and Stocksbridge Leisure Centre. Sports halls, broadly we do have enough provision, it's just that some of that's in schools and is difficult to access. So securing community use agreements for education sites and having a targeted approach to that is one kind of key recommendation, alongside retaining the existing provision we have and investing in ageing stock such as Ponds Forge, and potentially expanding at Springs Leisure Centre as well when we rebuild that. In terms of health and fitness, the strategy recommends increasing pay and play or affordable fitness provision by around 80 to 120 stations. Some of that need will be met through the rebuild work we are doing already and kind of underway already at Springs and Concord, but also kind of looks at potential reconfiguration and expansion of a number of public leisure centres and community leisure centres in the city. Athletics, the strategy recommends that we as a city need one indoor and one outdoor athletics track. Excuse me. And as a result, it talks about the resurfacing of the Sheffield Hallam University Community Athletic Stadium that we otherwise known as Woodburn Road, investing in that track to achieve track mark accreditation to allow us to have a competition venue back in the city. Gymnastics is around supporting improvement of existing facilities. Bowls, indoor provision, recommends a dedicated indoor facility, as we don't currently have one that meets competition standards. So that's recommended at Springs, whereas, well, that's already underway. Investment in key outdoor sites for bowls, but also looking at the kind of alternative usage of some of our long-term disused bowling greens for alternative physical activity opportunities. Squash, there's a recommendation around retaining existing kind of courts, particularly the pay and play and public leisure centre kind of sites, and ensuring we retain squash at Concord when we rebuild that, so that is something we're incorporating into those designs. Tennis and paddle, looking at refurbishing some priority parks, courts, and again working with the local, the Lawn Tennis Association to deliver covered tennis and public paddle provision at key sites. At the moment, we've got one paddle court at Hillsborough Activity Hub, but there is scope to kind of provide more paddle courts, and there is quite high demand for paddle demonstrated by the strategy. Just a couple more wheeled sports we included because we knew we had quite a lot of potential developments coming in terms of wheeled sports, and the strategy identified that on-board, which is one of our indoor facilities, needs replacing as they move to a different venue, but this could be done alongside providing a competition venue for the city, which again is something we don't have currently. An outdoor upgrading of a number of existing sites, which mainly sit in parks and countryside sites, and also the provision of a new facility at Concord Park, which is already underway in terms of development with parks and countryside colleagues. And finally, on the kind of key facility recommendations, we looked across the city at multi-use games areas, which are really important community accessible spaces, which are free to access for communities and can provide a significant amount of informal physical activity and sport space. So there's some priorities around refurbishing key park sites and improving access where needed, and considering kind of lighting at some of those sites where that would be appropriate. Next slide. So I think the key thing to say, alongside supply and demand across the city, we have to kind of map this against inequalities where we know there is inequalities in access to facilities, where we know there are lower activity levels, and where we know there are health inequalities. So it hasn't just been about thinking about the supply and demand, it's also been making sure we prioritise investment where we know we can have a big impact in terms of participation. The strategy does identify the priority areas which are part of our Sport England funded place investment programme due to their the demographic and the low activity levels in the high inequality high health inequalities in those areas. So there's some key communities that are highlighted, and we would, as we kind of develop this strategy, continue to work really closely with communities and partners to make sure that we are meeting their needs and that we do as much as we can to make those facilities inclusive and remove any barriers that to participation there may be. Next slide, please. So just to summarise, really, in terms of adopting the strategy, there are no direct financial implications at this time. Any of the recommendations and projects highlighted in the strategy would be subject to coming through the kind of usual governance process. For capital approvals, they would require separate business cases and assessment of the revenue and capital implications of those, and each one would consider kind of climate and equality impacts as we move through that process. In terms of adopting and why that is recommended, it gives us a clear framework for planning and prioritisation of investment. It helps protect, improve and modernise our really important facilities across the city. It supports council plan and wider outcomes and ambitions within the city's strategies. And it provides us a really important evidence base, particularly for the local planning authority, to protect and make decisions about future sport and leisure recreational needs. It also, as I've said previously, has been something that Sport England has asked us to put in place for ourselves and partners across the city to apply into their capital funding pots. So it will allow us to access external funding from both Sport England, national governing bodies and wider external funders. And I think, importantly, it also helps us do that really important thing of meeting the needs of our communities and reducing inequalities across the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone want to add anything else at this point in terms of the officers? Okay there. I'm going to take chair's prerogative. I've got a couple of questions. One's an opportunity, and one's a bit of a concern. So, firstly, I'll take the opportunity first. So there's a lot of racket and paddle sports that are popular at the moment. So there's a real resurgence in those, and there are all different kinds, such as we mentioned, paddleball, but also pickleball as well. So I think officers will need to keep an eye on this. We've got such a long time span here to 2039, lots of opportunities could come up of that kind during that operational period. Okay, so if that's a kind of, you know, keep your eye on it, and you know, I think it's a great opportunity to get people engaged in activity. So the concern I've got is that it's monitored in terms of the local population profile. So I saw a slide earlier that said local population profile highlighted. So this is absolutely critical because there are a lot of our underrepresented communities which are very key to the lack of a sport activity. So raising those will be really important. Pockets of deprivation exist, even within wards that are generally not regarded as being deprived. So keeping an eye on that, those pockets of deprivation, the health inequality and low sporting activity, particularly over such a range of city, huge city which we've got to represent here, but also the time period that we've got here as well. So that's my concern. Are there any questions or observations from members? So I've spotted Councillor Marion Elliott and Councillor Sophia. So Marianne, if you want to go first, and then Councillor Joe Otten. We'll do it in that order.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, firstly, thanks to everyone who's put this report together. It is quite a chunky document. I know it's not just a council document, is it? Many partners have been involved in this as well. And yeah, thanks to everyone who's read it, because it is quite a big one. I guess the top lines for me were inclusion and sustainability. You know, we know that access is uneven, isn't it? And across the city, this provides us with an opportunity to work on equitable access. And for me, that's not just about where venues are situated, it's also thinking about how people get there. So our venues on like public transport routes and active travel routes, and also providing free and cheap facilities as well as the paid for ones. And then the other big thing for me was sustainability of the buildings. So we know, like with our swimming pools, for example, which is a strategic priority, that if they're to be viable, they do need to be like covered in solar panels, for example. But broadly for me, I think it's because this is about improving health inequalities and attracting capital investment from Sport England, I am broadly in favour of the strategy, of adopting it. Just had a more specific question about athletics, so specifically the Sheffield Hallam University track at Woodburn Road. And obviously things have changed since this was first worked on. I do appreciate that. Community groups and schools, you know, lost their access because Hallam University neglected the track. And I do welcome that that's now been reflected in the report. And I think in the report it says Woodburn Road is the only outdoor community athletics competition track in Sheffield. So given its importance, I suppose my first question is, how can we ensure this is a major priority for the council, given the importance of athletics for the community? And then sort of in the shorter term, second question is, my understanding is that the track is perfectly usable, even without the track mark status. So, you know, some groups have got limited access, and what can we do to encourage Hallam University to provide greater access in the shorter term and medium term? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott, for your question. So yeah, in terms of Woodburn Road or the Sheffield Hallam Athletics Stadium, it's currently open. It's not open for schools, and unfortunately at the moment, because of the requirement around coached activity only, and having a qualified coach taking ownership and ensuring the safety of athletes using the track. It's kind of been documented that it's a hard track, so we know that it needs resurfacing. The shock absorbency is the issue with the track, and it's down at approximately kind of 17%. Typically, the aim and the best solution, and the best percentage, if you like, for a track would be around 50%, just to give you an idea. So we've worked with both Hallam University and UK Athletics to find a resolution in the short term, and we know that it's not ideal. We know that the access we would like to be better, but at least we have got kind of the track operating, and athletes are able to use the track as it currently stands. In the meantime, we're working on the future of that track. So I'm just about to set up a dedicated Woodburn Road development group to focus on the development of that facility. So that work will start to take place, and I'm working with the athletics community on that, and identifying some members of that community who can speak to the technical elements of what is needed and what strategically do we need for athletics stadium in the city. So that work is ongoing, but the new kind of development group will start imminently over this summer period. And we know that we need to secure investment for that to happen. So there's some ongoing work in the background about how we do that and how we make sure that we have a sustainable offer for athletics, both from a competition point of view. Therefore, we know we need to resurface in order to obtain the track mark accreditation that allows licensed competition, which is at the moment we don't have. The other element to note, and it is referenced within the strategy, is there is another outdoor athletics track at Chaucer School that we're also working with the school that is in the process of changing over at Education Trust at the moment, and that will take place over the summer period. So we've made contact with the incoming Education Trust, and we're hopeful to be meeting with them at the early stages in September to discuss how we can ensure community usage of that track. Without, I can't speak for the incoming Education Trust, but they're keen to engage with a conversation with us.
That's great. So the development group, just for clarity, that's going to contain people from the athletics community and representatives from the council that've got an appropriate amount of time to be able to look at this with some priority. Yeah.
Yes, and UK Athletics will also be involved.
Thank you. Councillor Sophia Saeed.
Hi, and thank you for your presentation. So I just had a few comments, or maybe a question, I'm not sure how to address it. You said about the equality assessment. So in terms of how do we, there's a lot going on here. So number one, how will you be dealing with, is there a room that is made for children with autism, or for overwhelming with noise and too much lights and being in different spaces, so parents or carers can calm, a space that they could have that kind of calmness, if you know what I mean. And also, in terms of equality, this is based in a very needy areas, so how activities and being healthy, I think sometimes it's families' third priority in terms of survival or whatever they do in it, and not everything can go through school. There's a lot of community grassroots organisation can support that. How will you approach the rest of the community that doesn't understand that kind of level of importance in terms of making this attractive enough to be part of and to come and to participate, if you know what I mean. And obviously that comes with equality in terms of employment as well, or apprenticeship or work experience, and getting them young in there in terms of helping them to understand the difference between sports and activities. So that's the kind of things. I think it might be a little bit markety, but how will you market that? Are you going to have, other than steering group and the typical stuff that are you going to have their faces on the posters? How will you encourage the individual young person that never thought this family wants to be a part of this overwhelming sensational centre that is being built? So it's more of that kind of. So I don't know if it's a question.
Hi, I'll succeed. I'll answer around the kind of facility design and what we're considering as part of that, and then Catherine will kind of talk So the kind of how we're going to encourage people in. In terms of the kind of new leisure centre designs that we're working through at the moment, we have done quite a lot of consultation in the kind of process of developing that and targeted work to talk to kind of communities and understand what those barriers might be. As part of the designs, we've considered kind of quite a number of things to make sure we are overcoming some of those barriers. Something you were talking about, like quiet spaces. So, for example, in Concord, we have designed sensory rooms within there, so there'll be quiet space there. And Springs Leisure Centre, again, we've got a kind of space that is a quiet area and also some kind of quieter seating areas in the cafe space for kind of neurodiversity, with neurodiversity users in mind particularly, but for kind of all sorts of people to kind of come in and feel less overwhelmed by the space. We've also considered things like women-only sessions and making sure we can make swimming pools and different spaces private with blinds that, you know, completely make those spaces private, that people can come in and feel confident that they can kind of exercise in those settings. So that is part of what we've looked at. Also, obviously, around wider kind of accessibility and making sure we've got changing places, toilet facilities in there for with kind of a bed and a hoist within them for kind of wider disability use as well, and to make sure our pools and other facilities within those centres are accessible. And then just in terms of the kind of wider imagery through the sites, making sure that that is kind of linked to the kind of local community and doesn't just potentially have kind of elite sport people within there, that it is much more kind of community focused. So, yeah, throughout any of the design processes and anything coming forward, we would always have a kind of an equality impact assessment that we work through to see that all those kind of different protected characteristic groups, where can we make the most impact and how can we make sure we're not kind of causing issues or creating more issues, and we're actually bringing people into the centres. Shall I hang to you for...
Thank you. So the second part of your question, Councillor Saeed, was around kind of community activation, and it's fair to say, so the hefty report that you've all read through is based upon a strategy of developing the right facilities in our city. Sit alongside that is our sport and leisure strategy and our work in communities around activation. So this strategy that you're kind of hopefully adopting today is the facility bit. We recognise that people don't just naturally come into facilities. We've got some work to do to encourage people to do that, and that's where our sport and leisure strategy would come in. We've also, and later on in the meeting, I'll be talking to you about the Sporting and Place investment, so that's where we've got some dedicated community development time working in at the moment, 5 communities, and I appreciate that isn't the whole of Sheffield, and we'd love it to be all of them, but it's a start, and we've got some investment secured to do that externally. And that will be some really dedicated going into communities, understanding, working alongside community leaders, building their capacity to deliver sport and activity, and working with them to be the community champions that encourage people to, one, value physical activity and hopefully move it higher up that list, because we know for people, like you've mentioned, kind of safety and having a secure home and having sufficient food and there are all sorts of needs that people need to address first, but we know that the value of physical activity is significant with that, but people need to feel that themselves, and in order to do that they need to feel engaged with something. So the role of our community development work will be doing that, as I say, at the moment in those 5 areas, and we're hopeful that there'll be potentially some more investment secured in kind of the coming years to broaden how many communities we can do that in. But alongside that, we'd also be working with, we know, the fantastic voluntary sector that we have in the city, which is better than anywhere else, I think, that would enable us to do some of that work even outside of those 5 areas, so we can work with local champions, and ultimately we need people to feel like these facilities are theirs, that they can access them. So we'll also work alongside our operator in the city, which is Everyone Active, so they have a active community strand to their work, which is both what's kind of in reach and outreach, so they're in the building and outside the building, and we're encouraging them and kind of pushing them to increase that delivery year on year, and part of that is ensuring that people within that team are and the team in the leisure centres are reflective of the communities that they serve. So there's a particular focus for them to recruit people from ethnically diverse communities, people with a disability, so that when people step through the door, they see someone they recognise and they see a face that's friendly and know that it's a welcoming space for them.
If it's okay for a follow-up.
Please do. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, two things. So I've worked with, I've been alongside working with Sheffield City Trust, and I think some things that they failed on, we need to make it better, learn from. So there is no, for example, affordable kitchen, nutritious kitchens. You're teaching people to be active, but you're not teaching them how to feed their soul. So it's like, and this is a very needy area, so it's like good, healthy nutrition, affordable nutrition, like a muffin will be cheaper on the market, or a burger will be cheaper on the market, then the sports facilities are always expensive. And that's one. And the other one is about where they failed was the reception languages. So I think instead of like putting it on, once we build it, then we can then put it in the high up. I think before you build anything, you need to have languages in there, and that would ensure that you would employ correctly later on. So welcoming language and posters, or just for people just to come in and say, I am welcomed here before they park the car. I think it's very, sometimes we just second things where it should be part of the foundation of where it is. I think so. Kitchen and languages, I would say, recommend that one. Thank you. That's it for me, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Joel.
Thank you. Yes, so thank you for this report. It's a huge piece of work gone into the evidence base, and I almost want to say to people, can we print it out and leave it in libraries so that people can look at it and see where what they can go and do locally. I'm slightly concerned. Obviously, I'm concerned that the rural west of Sheffield covered by the big park isn't included here, and I can understand the reasons for that. Although it does seem bizarre, because I think the council have a duty to all those people. In terms of support and leisure provision, but so that's the caveat on that suggestion. But I do wonder if it could be put into an interactive map on the website or something, saying that, look, these are all the facilities near you. Have you thought about doing these things? That would be a really useful way of making use of the work that's been done as part of the evidence base. I did have a couple of questions, both of which have been in different ways touched on by the previous questioners and been answered, both in terms of access transport-wise and in terms of the right kinds of interventions for deprived communities and kind of low mobility communities, if that's a term. But I am concerned that we're imagining that by putting, a lot of this, and we're talking about investing in communities where it's most needed. In those cases, we're actually replacing facilities that are already there. So it's not massive change as far as I can see it. And, absolutely, if we're going to replace facilities in Concord, we should do it in Concord, not somewhere else. I went to Concord many years ago for circuit training. That was quite a long drive for me. It didn't last very long. I also went there for some physio on my feet as part of a health join-up thing. I think the health join-up stuff is really, really useful for getting people in the door, because the people who most need to go through the door don't even go through the door in the first place, and I think that's been recognised. But I'm still concerned that we're not thinking about what it is. If you don't do a lot of movement at all, what kind of activity is really going to get you through the door? And if you don't have a lot of money, what is going to get you through the door? And I appreciate we'll have concession rebates and so on, but if we don't get that right, then we'll be putting nice facilities in some poor neighbourhoods, and the people going there will have driven across the city, causing extra traffic and extra fumes and so on, and not the local people. And if those are the people who are going to do it, you might as well build the thing over where those people are coming from. So how have we worked out what it is, what the right things to provide in those places are, and are we going to do that? Thank you.
Yeah, so, an age-old question, how do you know what everyone wants, right? Challenging, and that's partly, you noted earlier about the length of the strategy. It's kind of long for correct reasons, because we know trends will happen, things change, and so it will be reviewed on an annual basis. The challenge we have is, which is why we've got inactivity levels high across the country and health inequality exists, is because that message isn't getting through to people. So we know as a whole sector we need to do things differently, and we need to engage, as to Councillor Saeed's point, we need to engage community leaders in that. They're absolutely crucial to this. People will make decisions based on people they trust, which is friends, family, and people around them. And so, in a lot of cases, that community engagement, the community active community programme that's in our Everyone Active centres is absolutely fundamental to that. And our 15-year contract with Everyone Active gives us a significant period of time to work really closely and make sure that we're analysing that data and looking at that data as who is participating in our centres, and are they working with the right people, and are people coming through the door that are local? Part of the recommendation and part of the justification for the recommendations in the report, you may have noticed, is around the kind of 20-minute neighbourhood type idea. So we're wanting to make sure that people have somewhere they can walk to within a 20-minute period for exactly the reasons that you've identified. In addition to that, all of our Everyone Active centres will have active travel plans where there's a real focus on them, encouraging people to walk, cycle, or get public transport to the centres, and some of that is around sharing the message of that, and I note your point earlier. The other thing just to mention is that, again, this will come up slightly later in the meeting, but we have a service called the Move Well service that is specifically targeting and working to support people that wouldn't at all consider physical activity as something that they would naturally do. So there's a team of navigators that help people via phone triage to support them into making that kind of quite overwhelming and difficult step of going into a physical activity offer. And that service both promotes our leisure facilities, but also over 250 different community offers that are around in the city, delivered by our fantastic voluntary sector. And there's a platform called the Joy platform that has a marketplace with thousands of different activities across the city. That's a relatively new service. It's kind of been operating almost 18 months and still in its pilot phase. And so we've got some work to do to get, like you say, printing out and putting it in libraries. Here's all the things you can do. That will be that's a kind of interactive and live website that we can signpost people to, that will start to encourage people to look outside the windows and what fantastic things we have in the city. But again, some of that is messaging, and a lot of that is working with our community partners to ensure that people feel comfortable in going into our leisure centres.
Sorry, just also to add on that point, built facility strategies across the country are not always the same. Some just focus on indoor facilities, some focus on formal sports facilities. Within Sheffield, we've included the more informal spaces like multi-use games areas, those things that you often find within parks and countryside, our wheels parks, our kind of outdoor spaces, because we felt they were really important. We've heard from people through our sport and leisure strategy consultation that the leisure centre isn't always for them, and they may want to be active in a different way, in a different space. So the reason for including that much wider range of facilities within this particular strategy is because the importance in Sheffield that we feel they have, and it enables our planning authority to then protect those into the future and potentially for us to bring in investment. So I think, yeah, we've kind of tried to make sure we have got that wide range of facilities, because we know not everyone will want to access the kind of big leisure centres.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Walton? Right. So I've got Councillor Zahira Naz with a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation today and the pack with all the information. The strategy talks a lot about reducing health inequalities. How are we going to measure whether this strategy is actually increasing participation, especially in the most deprived communities, rather than just improving buildings? The report also identifies Tinsley as a priority area because of deprivation, low activity levels and poor access to facilities. So for me, what actions or investment do officers expect residents in Tinsley to see over the lifetime of this strategy? This strategy also talks about investment and it will be targeted at communities with the greatest health inequality. So there's 5 areas that have been identified. How will you as officers decide which areas receive investment first? And will members be able to monitor whether these commitments are being delivered? Because I think it's really important as a member for us to be able to have a review or, you know, come back in a year's time to see how progress is getting on, but also to see in terms of investment, you know, whether the commitments are being delivered. Many of the recommendations also rely on future funding and partnerships. So which recommendations are the highest priority over the next 2 to 3 years, and how confident are officers that the funding can be secured? And then my final question is, you know, the strategy is really good, you know, I like everything that's in there, but that's not the reality on the ground. And some of you may already know, when it comes to community sports facilities, it's not always easy for local people to get access. And I represent the Darnall Ward. We have EIS, we have the Olympic Legacy Park, we have Woodburn Stadium in our area. And right at the beginning, you know, if I didn't intervene, there would have been no community voices on any of those discussions, especially around Woodburn Road. I remember having to argue with Olympic Legacy to just make sure that casual football players, for example, in the Darnall Ward, were given spaces to play football. So it's fine having these really nice, big, shiny sports facilities in areas like Darnall, which are areas of high deprivation. But if local people can't get access, what's the point? And actually, just lastly, you know, there are lots of community gyms and boxing gyms across Sheffield. A lot of the time, these are local volunteers, grassroots people within our communities who have set these up. And they're not just a place for physical, you know, health. I visit loads, and I know for a fact that they reduce community cohesion. You know, they're really good at reducing antisocial behaviour. It gets a lot of the young people off the streets. It teaches them discipline. What are we going to do to help support them? Because a lot of the times they don't really get any external funding. They rely on, you know, paid memberships, which isn't often very much. Most of them are just about pay for overheads. But it's such an important resource in local communities across Sheffield. So many boxing gyms that are doing incredible work. How, as a council, are we going to support them as part of this strategy? Thank you.
Can I just intervene and say, I think that is a really good point, particularly your last one there, how we work with those community groups to encourage them, particularly the boxing clubs who do such a good piece of work. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to try and answer the how will we know that participation is increased and or health inequalities, you know, the work around health inequalities. The strategy itself is obviously a facility strategy, and we'll monitor that along with the action plan at the back of the strategy. So that'll be something we do on an annual sort of basis to have a look at what we have done within there, what we haven't, what is still to do, and is there anything that's coming. As we said, it's a constant review because things change during this period. So as part of for the strategy itself, we'll monitor it via the action plan. That is something we can come and report back on a you know, regular basis to committee if that is something that you would like to happen. The strategy itself and the monitoring of that won't necessarily monitor the participation, but what we will do across the city is obviously within our facilities, we do that work anyway in terms of looking at who's coming in and monitoring usage. So obviously with the larger leisure centres and a lot of the kind of leisure centres across the city, we use the Moving Communities platform, which enables us to kind of monitor people coming in and using the facilities in terms of demographics and where they're coming from and their ethnicity and age and gender and so on. So we will be able to continue that process, and on a quarterly basis we have all that information reported to us by everyone active. We would be able to, you know, see changes in participation as we build new facilities, as we refurbish facilities. So we will be able to monitor that through there. It is more difficult in terms of informal settings to monitor that. Certainly in kind of projects coming through, perhaps in parks and countryside where we've got particular funding to do it, there's always an element of that monitoring of participation and, you know, checking we're meeting the target groups that we're working with. So there will be a level of that as well that happens with kind of individual projects as we move through the delivery of the strategy. So I think that's also probably over to you for a little bit about the Sport England programme and how that will monitor, because that will also monitor some of the kind of usage and participations in those particular communities we're focusing on.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, Kate alluded to, the Moving Communities platform is a Sport England kind of online platform, and it I don't want to get too technical here because it's not my area, but in effect it pulls data from leisure management systems that leisure facilities have already. So when you swipe your card or you walk in a building, there's a leisure management system, and the Moving Communities platform drags all of that data from all centres, and as a city council we can see activity across a wide range of our leisure providers and some of our community partners in the 3 football clubs that we have in the area that also use similar kind of leisure management systems. So we have a good idea, albeit, as Kate alluded to, the kind of rich, really great stuff is some of the community in informal activity. It's really, really difficult, and as a sector across the country we've never got that right, because it's really difficult to do, because the nature of informal sport is it's informal and people don't always want to give you your details every time they go for a kickabout, or they don't want to tell people when they're kind of all of their details when they're at community-led sessions, and that's great, and we don't want to change that. So we've got to get the balance right between making sure we're not asking people for all of their details at everything they do, but also recognising that the value that informal activity has. And in a lot of spaces, that's our community partners that do all that brilliant work, including the boxing gyms that you alluded to. So just in terms of boxing, so as a team, we work heavily with our national governing bodies, so boxing is one of those. So we have a project officer that leads on partnership work with England Boxing, so we do a significant amount of support to clubs, affiliated clubs, and that doesn't cover all of them, but those that are affiliated, we provide workforce development training, fundraising type sessions to exactly solve the problem that you identified of having clubs that really struggle to raise funds on a year basis. So we provide support alongside the governing body for things like safeguarding and fundraising. And we do that across a wide range of sports. We'd love to do it across all of them, but we're a relatively small team, and that takes quite a lot of capacity to do that. But wherever we can, we provide additional support. I think the one bit missing, and sorry if I've missed some of the bits, come back to us, but the question you had about kind of selection of areas and specifically Tinsley. So the selection of areas, the reference to the 5 communities are related to the Sport England Place investment. Now where, again, we'll touch on it a little bit later, so we're stealing the glory from the later section, but in effect there was some data analysis that took place that overlaid indices of multiple deprivation, community of need data that covers things like access to services, education sites, all sorts of different kind of considerations in the communities of need data. It overlays inactivity data and health inequality data, and all of those data sets were overlaid against one another, and then in effect the kind of the top 5 or 6 areas were identified as a result of that. We took data, and we also then overlaid that with local insight that we have, because to do some work in communities, there needs to be some community action already taking place, because we know that takes a long time. If there's no one to work with, you're kind of starting from scratch, and actually the impact you can have is limited. So we took all the data, took our own insight to say, right, well, we need to go where there's some energy and some community action already taking place. So that's where those 5 areas came from. And as I said earlier, we'd love to do that across 30, 40 communities, because we know that it's needed, but we've made a start, and that's to be celebrated, and it's great that we've secured that investment. In terms of Tinsley specifically, as we know, we're struggling with a great big M1 that crosses and makes it difficult for people, which is why it's sadly kind of at the top of the wrong list, if you like, in some description for health inequality, air pollution, and a number of other things that affect that community. I can't sit here and say exactly what I think we'll be able to secure in that area. We know that there are some potential housing developments that are proposed in that area, so that could bring the potential for investment, but it's far too early for me to say, kind of sat here now, as to what that will look like. But there are some opportunities there that I think we would absolutely need to protect the grass space that may be lost from any of that. And that would give us some investment to be able to look at. But I think that what we do have in Tinsley is we have got that dedicated community development support that will be coming through the Sport England investment, and it's then making sure we make the most of the facilities that are already there, because we know, and I know you know, that some of those facilities aren't as well used as they could be because of the kind of barriers that remain there. And so that the role of that work will be to unlock some of those barriers and encourage people to kind of fill those spaces and be in those spaces. And I think there's more we could do with encouraging people to access the English Institute of Sport. Some of that is messaging around that centre, that it isn't just for elite athletes, that you would, you know, myself when I walk in the building, it can feel quite overwhelming. And I think we've got to do some messaging around that and that's where the community project officer that will be working in that area, that's kind of part of their role, to help bring the more people that come in and see it and feel that it's theirs, that will help turn the tide in that respect. But all of this work, as you well know, takes time to build that trust with communities in order to kind of get them involved and make sure that they're not continually feeling kind of left out.
Thank you for that, Catherine. And that is a really good point, the last point you just made, because there was a board meeting which I had earlier last week with everyone active, and they're going to be an important ingredient in this. They have, I was going to mention this later in the performance report, but they are now doubling the amount of outdoor activities that they are doing in communities around Sheffield, and that's the kind of order of thing we want. Greater engagement, greater participation, and they pointed out at the board meeting that they too were interested in taking the emphasis to some extent, although it's important, for the English Institute of Sport to be an elite place. Yes, the elite side is really critical, but also that it's a place people feel welcomed at and will go in. Yeah, so that was raised. Yeah. So I was aiming for past, so we've got an hour left for the rest of our items, but I wanted to give this a fair wind to get through it. Are there any last questions on this for the officers? Councillor Joel.
Just a quick suggestion in general about use of a lot of, swimming or gyms and stuff. Something I think that should be considered long term is basically allowing a lot more low cost one-term use options, especially with gyms, because that's the big, prohibitive thing. People don't want to sign up to to a membership if they could get in the door for, you know, even something really low like £3 where you'd not really be making any much money, but let them do that a few times and then they'd be a lot more likely to sign up and get involved regularly. Yeah, that's all I have to add on that. Thank you.
Do any officers want to reply or not?
Yeah, I think that kind of resonates with the strategy and some of the findings around making sure there is that pay and play opportunity rather than the kind of long-term memberships that people sometimes struggle with in terms of finances, making sure and kind of protecting and increasing where possible that kind of pay and play accessible kind of option. Operator does also have a concessions policy, which obviously gives concessions to a range of different people to be able to access facilities. And as part of our kind of healthy activities and food programme, there are what are called half passes, which go out to young people also to kind of access gym and swim facilities free of charge through the summer holidays and different holidays. So we do have some of that already kind of going on, and yes, certainly it's something we want to make sure that people can access facilities and, you know, to try them out as well to find whether they want to kind of continue, sort of thing.
Great, thank you. If we are going to reach recommendations here, I wondered if you could put those on the screen. Kate?
I don't think I've got the recommendations on the screen. I can read them out. I can read out the recommendation if you would like.
Well, they are on page 58 of our report.
Yeah, so the recommendations are the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee is recommended to approve the adoption of the Sport and Leisure Built Facility Strategy for Sheffield 2026 to 2039 as set out in this report, and to note the content of the strategy and report.
And it's for me to ask, are we all agreed? And if not, please raise your hand if you dissent. Then I think that is agreed. Thank you. Item 10. So this is Sheffield's Green and Blue Spaces strategy. Thank you very much, officers.
Yeah. In terms of item number 10, the Sheffield's Green and Blue Spaces strategy, the organisation that I work for, Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust, were part of the Task and Finish group, so maybe I need to declare an interest. Sorry, I didn't do it at the beginning, but I'll do it now.
Thank you. You've declared an interest. I don't think it's a material interest in terms of it was a broad range of organisations we were working with on the Task and Finish. Are you okay with that, Ruth?
Absolutely, we work with them all the time now. I think it's great that you're working with them. So yeah, no, it's not anything that should cause any kind of problems here.
Thank you. In fact, if anything, it's a positive thing. Yes. So, thank you. So, pages 487 to 502. The committee has been asked to note the contents of the report, so thank you, members and partners who participate in the Task and Finish group. We wish to develop a new green and blue spaces strategy, and for the uninitiated, green is the open spaces, blue is the waterways, whether that be canals, rivers. The report follows a programme of work undertaken by a cross-party Task and Finish group, established to review the green and open spaces strategy that's existed for a few years. And the intention is to take that beyond 2030. I don't think there's a finish date being agreed yet. The group also considered how Sheffield's waterway strategy would then fit into that, so we do the two things together. So we're going to lead to a recommendation that the city combines the green and blue spaces that it has in itself. Today's decision is not an approval of the new strategy. It's an agreement to begin the work to develop one, and any future strategy is going to be developed in partnership with communities, with the various organisations and stakeholders across the city, and then come back for consideration. I think I'm going to point out some of the strategic themes for this and then move on to officers and hand over to officers. So the new strategy is intended, because I was involved in the initial task and finish group, as was Councillor Marianne. The intention is to create a long-term vision for Sheffield's parks, waterways, woodlands and wider green and blue infrastructure, to bring together green and blue spaces, to support the Council's wider ambitions around healthy communities, climate resilience and nature recovery, biodiversity. We also want to strengthen partnership working and help position Sheffield to attract future investment and funding into its waterways and parks and woodlands. And finally, to ensure communities and stakeholders play a central role in shaping this strategy as it goes on. So that is quite a tall order. It's a tier 1 strategy. So maybe, Stuart, I think you're going to answer to this, if you can just explain what a tier 1 strategy is and how critical it is to Sheffield. A really significant piece of work. Elected members, officers and partners from across the city worked on the original task and finish group. So I'm going to hand on to you, Stuart, to take it forward.
Cool, thank you. So this report brings back the findings and the recommendations of the Green Open Space Strategy Task and Finish Group, which has met over the last year. So back in September 2024, there was a committee meeting then which recommended that the Task and Finish Group should review the Sheffield's Green and Open Space Strategy, consider the remaining period to 2030 and make recommendations about the longer-term strategic direction for the city. In the Task and Finish Group, members also considered the Sheffield Waterway Strategy, as you mentioned, and whether there's a case for bringing these two strategies together into one green-blue strategy for the city. And the report before you today is obviously, it's not the strategy itself, it's the work and the recommendations coming out of that Task and Finish Group. So, in summary, the Task and Finish Group met 6 times from October 25 to April 26. It included elected members, council officers, and a range of external partners. So the areas that we explored through those sessions included the existing Green and Open Space Strategy, the Waterway Strategy, the changing policy environment, nature recovery and climate resilience, and a contribution, it's Green and Open Spaces and their contribution to the local plan and city goals, Natural England's Green Infrastructure Framework, which is kind of part of that policy environment. There's a lot of new thinking coming out these days about how, especially in cities and urban areas, green spaces really and blue spaces contribute so much more than just recreation to the city as a whole. We've also looked at community engagement and partnership approaches, because obviously how we engage with communities across all areas of Sheffield is really important in shaping the strategy going forward. And also linked to that is the future governance arrangements for how the strategy development process would be taken forward, including resource arrangements as well. Just to flag some of the groups that we engaged with external to the council, that included Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust, the Sheffield Green Spaces Forum, the Environment Agency, the University of Sheffield, and representatives of the Waterways Strategy Group. So the Task and Finish Group overall conclusion was that Sheffield should develop a new green and blue strategy for the city, rather than simply just an update of the existing green and open spaces strategy. Members felt that the opportunities and challenges facing the city are significant and have changed considerably since 2010. And we've highlighted a few of those kind of key kind of emergencies or challenges that the city are facing going forward, which includes climate resilience, nature recovery, public health actually, public health and well-being, and the benefits and opportunities available to our green and blue spaces to support everyone's health and well-being across the city. The blue and green infrastructure is essential city infrastructure supporting our resilience, sustainable long-term funding and asset management, We'll come on to some of the successes of the existing strategy. One of them is around quality of spaces around the city. One of the challenges that we now have, that we've raised that quality, is how do we sustain those sites, facilities and services into the future with current resource constraints. Obviously, partnership delivery is key to that, and also, as we've talked about, community involvement in shaping our priorities. So there's been significant achievements in the current strategy, which has been running since 2010, which has included a significant change in the quality of our green and open spaces. I think going up to a third of sites meeting the Sheffield standard when we first started in 2010 to almost 90% of sites now reaching that standard. Alongside that, we have exceptional quality, which is recognised by the Green Flag Award. And we're really excited to be able to tell you that our 19th site has just been awarded the Green Flag Award, so that's the Shirebrook Valley in the southeast of the city. And that was the only kind of lack area of the city which didn't have a green flag, so it's really, really good news. And a really important wildlife site in that area of the city as well. So also major improvements to play provision with 50% increase in play value across the city through that time period. Obviously, ecological approaches, which you can see in the city centre through the Greater Green, have been kind of critical to our development, sustainable urban drainage, natural flood management, and as we've seen from the recent very hot weather, the importance of trees and water environments as part of tackling the heat island effect as well. Increasing income generation has also been a really kind of strength of the strategy previously as well, which we'd like obviously to take on into the future as well. Group has felt that these successes demonstrate the importance of a clear long-term strategic approach to how Sheffield manages its green and blue infrastructure. We've mentioned at the introduction that it's a Tier 1 strategy we're going for, which is a strategy that is citywide. It covers not just the council services outside of parks and countryside, but it also deals with, works with partners and landowners across the whole city. So it's a partnership approach that will be definitely needed to ensure the success of a future strategy of this scale. And as we talked about, there's going to be a kind of three areas that were really broad themes that we're going to kind of strengthen the strategy around, which is people's health and well-being, outdoor spaces designed and managed to contribute to everyone's health and well-being is really important. That's not just the quality of spaces, but it's the facilities they provide and the services that they provide within them to engage with communities and support people's health and well-being. Climate resilience and nature recovery. As we know, there's significant benefits, heat island effect, floodwater management, nature emergency tackling, all those things are really important to us. And actually active travel as well, because it's not just the bubbles of green and blue spaces, but it's how we connect these and network these together. And obviously sustainable management and investment to ensure that we have quality facilities into the future. So the strategy also considered national guidance coming out, which comes from groups like Nature Towns and Cities, which I'm part of a training group in nature towns and cities at the moment, and also Natural England's Green Infrastructure Framework, which is obviously going to play very heavily in the shaping of our new strategy. So in terms of next steps, should the committee support the recommendations today, the next stage would be to establish how the work can be resourced and then governed, obviously with our partners across the city. Given the scale of the tasks, significant further engagement would be needed with community stakeholders and partner organisations across the city. And any future strategy would come back through the council decision-making process for consideration and approval once developed. So, Chair, in summary, the Task and Finish Group's view is that Sheffield has benefited significantly from having a clear long-term strategy for its green and open spaces, but that the city now requires a broader and more ambitious green and blue spaces strategy to address the opportunities and challenges in the coming decades. We would therefore ask the committee to support the recommendations of this report.
Yes, thank you very much, Stuart. That's excellent. My question, before I ask other folks, is to do with resourcing. So there a couple of options were discussed in the Task and Finish group. I think they're still in development. Is that right? Given it's a Tier 1 strategy, I think it needs some proper resourcing.
Sorry, absolutely, yes. It does need proper resourcing. As we've talked about, if we do want to authentically engage with communities across the whole city, that does take resources and time, which we currently don't have within our existing capacity.
So any questions from members? I've got Councillor Joe Orton, and Councillor Zahira Naz.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for welcoming this. I don't know if I should say I'm a member of the Sheaf and Border Rivers Trust. I don't know if that needs to be declared as an interest. I'm just a member. I'm not on the committee or anything. I have a question which is slightly tangential, possibly. So apologies for that. The investigations going on in Encliffe Park around the flood mitigation measures. Are they under a previous version of this strategy? Is the strategy, how does it relate? And also what's going on there? Because I remember we had the proposal to do this 10 years ago, and then it kind of went away again. So I'm slightly surprised to see it back and see all the fences up.
I can respond on that if that's okay. It's not particularly linked to this strategy. They are surveying the ground underneath the large field, looking at around flooding. So it is a little bit aside to this strategy. It's not linked to this, and it's probably worth saying that specific information about Encliffe Park would go to Charity Trustees Subcommittee, where anything to be decided about that park, because it's a charitable park. But they are looking at what the ground is like with regard to flooding and flooding resilience. So it does link into this strategy. It's not completely tangential.
So, I mean, thank you for that. I mean, it came as a package with a number of other sites 10 years ago, one of which was one we were very concerned about in Guildfield Wood. Is the rest of the package coming back from 10 years ago, or is it just that location?
I apologise, I don't know. I think those conversations are probably happening at TRC committee, would be my guess. I can, however, speak to colleagues in flooding and have them speak to you after this committee, if that's helpful.
And also, just might be worth flagging that, yes, as a Tier 1 strategy, this strategy Venn diagramly links with a whole range of other strategies, including the flood and water management strategy, the built facilities strategy, which you've just been hearing about, the sports pitch strategy. There's a whole range of connected strategies which we need to weave our green and blue strategy into.
Yes, I would add I mean, I don't know if there's a strategy for it, but the role of under ESR of hardening sites against fly tipping is probably also something we might want to think about, working with.
There's lots of link to working, which is why the resourcing has to be good. Councillor Zahira Naz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this report to us. I absolutely welcome the recommendation to refresh the strategy and developing a new green and blue spaces strategy. I think it's a positive step for the city, absolutely. However, while many of Sheffield's more deprived communities are close to green space, there are often less green space overall and poorer access to larger, high-quality green and blue spaces. So how will this new strategy address these inequalities and ensure everyone has access to quality green spaces, not just nearby green spaces? And also, can I ask how communities, ward councillors, local organisations will be involved in shaping the new strategy so it reflects the different needs of neighbourhoods across Sheffield rather than taking a one-size-fits-all approach?
Hi, yes, we will be working with a whole range of organisations to link with communities to understand priorities and needs of different communities across Sheffield. So that will include the local area committees and the network that they're all engaged with as well. There's a whole range of other organisations, including VAS and their network, that we also need to work with as well. These kind of points were talked about quite a lot in the task and finish group. So yeah, that's really important. In terms of the quality of space, not just actual green space on your doorstep, that is definitely, that quality agenda is something that we're still working on as part of the existing strategy, and that equity and or inequality of quality is something that we have made great strides, I think, on, but there's still a way to go in the east, northeast and southeast of Sheffield to get all of those sites safe, clean, welcoming and accessible. On top of that, it's not just about having safe, clean and welcoming sites, it's also about having sites that people feel that they are comfortable to go into and feel that they can engage in good exercise and well-being activity there, which sometimes needs to be facilitated through services, and maybe the Hillsborough Activity Hub is a really good example of that, and actually the Edge UK facility in Hillsborough Park as well, where they're offering different types of services and facilities to different communities in that area. What we need to be doing in areas all over the city is spread that network of community hub facilities within our recreational spaces out. So that's one of the ways to have sustainable quality facilities, by having site presence within our officer types presence in our sites, but also where to get people engaged in a positive way in green spaces. Because if we can get that positive engagement, we have a converse reduction in antisocial behaviour and negative activity, which costs so much and causes so much damage, which sometimes we don't have the resources to repair or replace.
I know. Do you want to come back? Of course. Yes, and then Officer Tom Smith indicated he wants to speak.
Okay. It's just a comment really. Over the last few weeks I've spent lots and lots of time in my local parks, and I knew that people love going to the park, but I didn't realise just how important parks are to local people, because I've had lots of conversations, and I went to lots of different parks in the Darnell ward and had conversations with people that were there, and what sometimes we don't realise, people don't always have access to back gardens or front gardens, and the weather is so beautiful these days, you know, people just really were out in the parks enjoying picnics. And people were telling me this is their safe space, this is their space not just to improve physical health, but emotional health. We all know connecting with nature, how that benefits us. So being out there in the green space is so important. And also with families and children, you know, out sitting in park. And indeed on Monday, we were going to have a community meeting, and we decided to have it in one of our local parks. So we literally just sat on the grass and talked about how important it was, these spaces. We could never underestimate the value of green spaces in our communities, and I really felt that over the last few weeks. And I think it's, you know, this is why I think this strategy would be absolutely brilliant in, you know, kind of recognising and addressing that.
If you don't mind me just quickly saying, I think there is a bit of a point. The built facilities strategy, really important. A lot of people would say, I can't do physical activity, I can't do that, that's not for me. But what they don't know is that they walk into their local park, they might walk through it daily, and that's what that is. It is making them healthier and hopefully improving their well-being in lots of different ways.
Thank you. So Officer Tom Smith, and I think Councillor Marion Elliott indicated to speak.
Yeah, don't worry, colleagues, it's not a question. Thank you, Chair. I guess I just wanted to reiterate the point of this being a Tier 1 strategy and being really important in that context. So, because it's a Tier 1 strategy, by design, it should affect everything that the local authority does and the way in which we interact with our partners. So, whilst this is a green and blue spaces strategy, you know, as Councillor Otto referenced earlier, you know, this should be affecting our response to things like fly tipping, to antisocial behaviour in green spaces, to, you know, how we're managing areas, how we're improving access and accessibility for people across the city. So the very design of it being a Tier 1 strategy and it being at that level and being scoped to that level should actually help us as an organisation to start to address some of those wider issues around the quality of green spaces across the city.
Thank you very much, Tom. Just to say that, from what I understand, the terms of reference haven't been set up yet, so all these elements should, or can, and should be put into that. Yeah, what we're talking about, you know, the very basic grassroots level, ward councillor level, and all the other organisations, plus the different policy committees as well. What a big job. Okay. Councillor Marianne Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't actually have any questions because I was quite involved in this, but I just wanted to sort of share reflections from Task and Finish Group, if that's all right, just sort of speak positively about this. So yeah, thank you to everyone who's involved. And I think essentially this came about because the Green Open Spaces strategy really needs an update, and it's a very good strategy for all the reasons that have been mentioned in here. But things have really moved on since 2010, haven't they? For example, like spatial mapping is so much better now, so we can properly look at things like strategic wildlife corridors and equitable access to nature, building on your point, and that technology is there now, so we can actually do that much more effectively. And then, of course, the blue element is a really important part of Sheffield, being Sheffield, isn't it, with, you know, 5 rivers and many, many waterways, so it really made sense to bring them together, and there's so many people actively engaged in that space as well, in the waterways. And, you know, green and blue spaces are so important for people in Sheffield. We are really, really blessed here, aren't we, with beautiful parks, valleys, waterways, woodlands. And like you said, you know, they are safe spaces for people, and they're free and they're accessible. And as you said, you know, they do also help with climate resilience, which is another thing we can really factor in here. And the Task and Finish group was actually a really good example of a Task and Finish group. Everyone was really engaged, so we had quite a lot of partners, you know, the Wildlife Trust, University, the Environment Agency, Green Spaces Forum, Waterways Group. I hope I've not forgotten any. So, yeah, just to sort of, you know, really try and promote this, you know, it will, if we make this decision today, it'll enable the strategy to go ahead at Tier 1 level. You know, as Tom said, that's really important because it brings things together like the built facility strategy, the playing pit strategy, but also things like looking at play equity to make sure that we've got access, equitable access to play spaces across the whole city and active travel corridors as well. So it brings together different departments in the council, which we all know is quite important. So there isn't that sort of siloed approach to land management. And then we do need some resource for officer time and obviously for proper consultation and engagement with Sheffielders like we did with the community strategy. So, yeah, just can't stress that bit enough, really.
Right. Any more for any more? Or shall we move to recommendation? Right. So, on page 489 are the recommendations for approval. I think we need to read them out. I don't have them in front of me.
Okay, so just in terms of the recommendations is obviously to note the contents of the report, thank the elected members and partners for participation in the Task and Finish group, support the outcomes and recommendations of the Task and Finish group, which are to deliver a refresh of this strategy, and as part of this broaden its remit to become a green and blue spaces strategy for Sheffield. And we've got here to 2040. That was because it kind of aligns with a number of other kind of strategic processes, including the city goals. And request officers to explore the resourcing options to undertake the development of the green and blue space strategy renewal.
Right, thank you very much. So my question is, are we all agreed? Indicate for any dissent. Okay, I think we're agreed on this, so it goes forward. Right, thank you. Right, item 11. So this is the Sport England Place Investment Subcontract. Thank you, Stuart. If you want to do a swap of officers, that would be great. So the Sport England Place Investment Subcontract. Hey, I'm just hoping this is a very short item because it needs to be, because this has been dealt with previously. And it's just a tweaking we're doing here, and I'll explain that. So the committee is being asked to approve the council entering into a subcontract with Sheffield Hallam University Services Limited to enable delivery of 2 elements of the Sport England Place Investment Programme. Now, in March 2026, very recently, members who were there may recall approving acceptance of this funding, but following further clarification from funding partners, the funding cannot be provided through a grant agreement. Instead, it needs what's called a subcontract arrangement, and the report here in front of us seeks approval for that revised mechanism. It's not new funding, it's not a new programme, but the mechanism for delivery has been changed. So I can leave it at that and ask to any officer input.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In short, this is an element of a technicality. As Councillor Holmeshaw identified, this is not a new programme. It's the previous committee meeting, the acceptance of the funding has already been approved. This is Sport England investment into a mechanism via NCSEM, which is the National Centre of Sport and Exercise Medicine. And that is a cohort of organisations in Sheffield that worked together and were successful in a bid to Sport England for that funding. Because that body is not isn't able to accept funding because it's not an accountable body, it's just a group of people. Sheffield Hallam University are the lead applicant, so they enter into a grant agreement with Sport England. We at Sheffield City Council have been nominated as the lead operator of 2 of the elements of that funding, which is the community development and the Move Well service. Previously, the committee had approved us entering into a grant agreement with Sheffield Hallam University. Because of the terms and conditions of Sport England funding, Sheffield Hallam University cannot onward grant money, so they can't enter into a grant agreement, hence why we now have to enter into a subcontract with Sheffield Hallam University. So a bit of a mouthful. I'm happy to take any questions on it, but in effect, as I say, this is a technicality. Just to give a little bit of background, because I know a number of you weren't part of the previous committee, so this is Sport England funding called Place Investment. So this is a national programme that across the country, areas were invited to apply to secure this investment. As a city, we've secured just over 1.3 million. As you can see in the report, £1,053,927.24 would come directly to Sheffield City Council for the delivery of the community development aspect of the project and the Move Well service. The community development aspect, as we've touched on a couple of times in an earlier item, but in effect that is intense community work in 5 areas across the city, and those 5 areas, I will make sure I get this right, is Firth Park, Woodthorpe, Arbourthorne, Batemore and Jordanthorpe, and Tinsley. And as I alluded to earlier, the reason for the selection of those communities was based on both data analysis of data sets that included indices of multiple deprivation and communities of need, inactivity data and health inequality data, alongside insight that helped us understand where we can work effectively with our community partners. Alongside the community development aspect of the programme, we were also delivering Move Well, which is a physical activity referral and signposting programme supporting people with long-term health conditions to be more active. And we have a team of navigators who operate and provide phone triage support to people that are vulnerable and need additional support into being active. So they may have multiple and complex need, both from a physical and mental health, but also some motivational support needed. And that is a service that is citywide. So anyone can be either referred by a health professional, such as a GP, or they can self-refer using a chatbot, which is not an online tool, or they can direct refer, so they can go on a website and look for activities they'd like to get involved in, and they can actually self-refer to that. So the funding that we have got permission to accept from previous committee would contribute towards those two elements, and there's details within the report of exactly what the makeup of that funding is. To summarise succinctly, that is staffing in most cases, because it's staff capacity that is needed. But in the community development aspect, it also includes a commitment to investing in community services, which is a posh way of saying investing in community groups to do the fantastic work they already do, as and when we come across them and as we develop them. So in short, we're simply looking for approval today to enter into a subcontract with Sheffield Hallam University. I'm probably going to leave it there for noting your aspects of we're running a bit short on time, unless there are any questions, and I'm happy to read out the full recommendation if you would like, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes, no, I welcome this. I am, as you said, new to this, so I did highlight, and I think you've possibly explained it already. I did wonder what it meant to say coordinating and supporting place-based community development activity through support and leisure function, which is what the Move Well service has an established role in doing. And you have kind of said a little bit what that is. Just like you say, it feels slightly frustrating that we have to employ lots of staff to join people up to services that exist when, you know, they could go to a website, like you said, there's a web interface, they could just go and do it. But I can see the value of doing that. Just for my own sanity, what is it, if a frontline member of this service is speaking to a member of the public, what are they saying to them, or what are they doing for them as part of this offer?
I'm assuming you mean in terms of the Move Well service? Yeah, so our navigators are trained in motivational interviewing, so they go through a series of first ensuring they receive information from where they've been referred from, so that could be from a physio, a health professional, a GP, a range of different avenues in. We receive health professional referrals where there are complex need, so those conversations are supporting people to understand their current physical and mental health and whether they're ready to kind of become active. In some cases they're not, and so the staff capacity is quite intensive because we do multiple phone calls with people to ensure that we're kind of managing their progress over a period of time. We then establish their kind of wants and needs, so that might be that they want something that's local to them, so we provide the kind of search function in effect, so we use our internal platform called the Joy platform that helps us to identify what they want to do, where they want to do it, how much they want to pay. So it's important to say this isn't free for people that are being referred. Some of the activities we have are free, but not all of them. All of them have an element of concession related to them, so they're not full price. So that period the navigators will work through. In some cases it's a 10-minute call, in some cases it's a 2-hour call, depending on the needs of that person. We also have a translation service that's heavily used because, as I say, and the number of people that we receive have multiple challenges. So they may have English as an additional language, they may have complex health conditions that we need to ensure that wherever activity we're signposting them to is suitable for them, and the kind of end operator or community leader has got the right skills and expertise to be able to support them in activity.
Thank you. No, I think that's a sufficient explanation. I think I don't have to declare this. I think possibly I was a customer of this scheme. Actually, it turns out I mentioned getting my foot physio at Concord. They referred me to a back place at Gravesend and Leisure, and after I did their thing, they gave me a discount on membership of the gym at Ponds Forge. So does that mean I got that?
So there is, across the city we have both exercise referral, which I think is what you've benefited from there, from what you've described. The Move Well service is for people with significant needs, so additional needs. So that tended to be when a GP was unable to directly refer them in to activity, as it sounds like your experience had been. So our MoveWell team support, as I say, people that either aren't quite ready to take that journey, don't have the capacity to do that, maybe have multiple barriers, and we're receiving a significant number of service users at the moment with severe mental health need, which tends to be a consistent kind of trend across our service users. But yeah, so there are two elements. It sounds like you've brilliantly benefited from our exercise referral scheme that operates across a number of the venues that we were talking about earlier.
Thank you. I won't give you my whole medical history. I'm sure you don't want to hear it. I will just say the final lesson for anybody listening is I accidentally didn't renew the discounted membership at the gym in time, so I lost it, and I said, well, can I have it back? And they said, no, you need to go through the whole referral process again. So I've not been back to the gym since, but that's on me.
There's a learning point there, isn't there? Yeah. Okay, so could you give us the recommendations, please, Catherine?
Oh no. So I'll attempt, sorry, my eyesight's not very good. So that the recommendation is to approve the council entering into a subcontract with Sheffield Hallam University Services Limited for the delivery of community development and MoveWell programmes as part of the Sport England Place investment programme, with a total contract value of £1,053,927.24, including VAT, subject to terms not being materially different to those outlined in the report.
Thank you very much. Are we all agreed? Lovely. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next item. I've got a feeling we might slightly overrun, but we'll see. So this is item 12, which is the new... Thank you, Catherine, officer. This is the new hedge cutting operator cost increase. And so my note is that members of this committee, of which there are a lot of new members, the committee allowed the commission of a hedge maintenance contract in February 2025. The procurement process has now been completed. However, tender prices have come back higher than originally anticipated. The additional approval is therefore required before the contract can be awarded. So this is an operational contract that supports the council's ongoing hedge maintenance programme across parks, housing estates and public realm sites throughout the city. So it does not propose any change in service standards or scope of work. The report is primarily just procurement and contract maintenance. However, the tender returns have exceeded original estimate, meaning approval is required before officers can proceed with awarding the contract. So I'm going to hand this on to officers. I think it's going to be you, Ruth, is that right? Ruth Bell. So the report seeks approval to proceed with a new hedge maintenance contract following completion of the procurement process. So if you could outline some of those changes that have led to increases.
Thank you, Chair. I can potentially do this quite quickly because, like you say, this is the second time that this has come to committee. So the report seeks approval to proceed with the award of a new hedge maintenance contract following completion of the procurement process. As the Chair stated, committee approved the commissioning of the citywide hedge maintenance contract back in February 2025, and that procurement exercise has now been completed, but tender prices were at a higher level than was originally estimated when the approval was first sought and gained, and because of that we need approval for the revised contract value before the contract can be awarded. As stated, it is important to point out that the report isn't proposing to change the scope of the service. The work remains substantially the same as previously approved by committee. The issue before you today is around the cost of delivering that service within the current market. So the hedge maintenance programme is an important element of the council's grounds maintenance arrangements, and it supports the management of parks and green spaces, housing land and other council land owned sites across the city. The programme helps ensure that hedges remain safe, accessible and appropriately maintained while supporting the overall quality and appearance of public spaces, as we've referred to in other items in this committee. Regular hedge cutting is really important in maintaining sight lines, improving accessibility to sites and reducing other issues that are associated with overgrown vegetation. So following committee approval, officers undertook a competitive procurement exercise in compliance with procurement rules and then assessed submissions against criteria such as price, quality, social value and capacity and ability to deliver that service. The process did attract interest from the market and it generated a number of compliant bids, but all of the tender submissions were significantly above the original cost estimate that had been approved at the previous committee. I think it's probably important to say that if the contract isn't awarded, essential maintenance work could be delayed or reduced. The council might face increased operational risks associated with overgrown vegetation, service standards might deteriorate across spaces, and then it's likely that additional officer time and cost would be required in order to undertake a further procurement exercise, with no guarantee that further exercises would bring back a lower cost. Officers do believe that proceeding with the award represents the best value and lowest risk option available. So we're asking the committee to note the contents of the report, approve the increase in the contract value to enable award of the hedge maintenance contract following completion of the procurement process, and then approve the award of the contract for an initial 3-year period with the option to extend for a further year in accordance with the report. And just in case you want the specifics of value, the original report suggested £105,000 per year, and it's come back at, I believe, £150,000. Let me just double check that in case it's 140. 105,000 was what was brought to committee previously and approved, and the contract is approximately £150,000 per year based on the procurement exercise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. It's a bit of a jump. Yes. It is. I've noted. What I do is I chair the allotments advisory group. And I've noted within there, even in the past year, there's been increases in like construction materials and maintenance of all increased, like they increased during the pandemic, but there's been an ongoing increase in those costs from contractors. So this is one of those, but it's such a significant cost. My question would be, did anyone say why that had increased, or were officers able to dig and find out why there was such a large jump of, I'm not even going to estimate the percentage, but it's a jump.
I think it's probably about a 40% increase.
40%, yeah.
No, I don't believe anybody said why it came back, but what we did see was that it consistently came back at that level. This isn't one single operator that suggested it's much more expensive. It's consistent across the board, and like you say, we are seeing it in lots and lots of different places. Prices went up significantly through and after COVID and have continued to go up since then as well.
Any questions? Councillor Joe Alton?
Thank you. No, I kind of agree. I would totally agree with your comments, Brian. It's the question. I think it's too late to do anything about this. I think you've got to accept it. I think the question to ask is for next time, 3 or 4 years time, do we understand? We should have an understanding of why, where the costs lie, so that we can make sure we get a good price next time. Is it something we're doing? I know kind of public sector procurement is always a minefield in terms of getting good value. It's always difficult. But we might reflect on, for next time, how we get that right.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any more questions or observations? Hey.
Hi. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Joel.
Yes, please. So I've noticed it's 43% increase, and I'm wondering about previous years. So I know we were saying the 105, that was the original quote. No, it wasn't. Was that for last year's delivery of this? Or just double check.
Not last year's, that was the previous contract. So I don't know exactly how long the previous contract ran for, but you can assume at least a couple of years. So that was probably around about the COVID times, perhaps a bit before.
Yeah, so it is. So that was starting from 105, maybe, you know, let's guess at 2020 or 2019. Yeah. Yeah, so that explains part of it, yeah. I suppose I wonder do we know how many contractors took part and gave quotes on this?
Apologies, we will have that information. I don't have it to hand. I can get it for you afterwards, but I appreciate that doesn't help with you deciding whether or not to approve it.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, why is it that we're looking at a 3-year contract? Why can't it be, you know, 1 with 1 year of extension, or 2 years with a year of extension? What is it that's making it that we have to go for that length of time, especially considering there's going to be 2 sets of elections in the next 2 years, and, you know, different administrations might not like it. So just, yeah, that'd be good to know. Thank you.
I think it's important to say we probably don't have to. This is what is being proposed, 3 years plus 1. I think it's probably important to say that 1 year plus 1 means that you potentially have to redo this exercise, which doesn't come without cost and time every single year. So it's a choice that we've made with the 3 years plus 1 on this particular contract.
I wonder whether I might just add as well that in the marketplace, any private contractor will want the longest contract they can possibly get to get the best value out of that contract in terms of them needing to purchase equipment or mobilise resource. So we have to strike a balance between giving a long enough contract to get the best value but a short enough contract that we can review it regularly, Councillor McGuigan, and often with these kinds of contracts that becomes three years plus extensions, because 3 years is kind of in my experience, is the minimum to get enough people to actually bid on a competitive basis for a contract.
Yeah. Sorry, I had one more on this. Oh, that was it, about the exploring the alternative option to deliver it with the Parks team, and it said it was rejected due to the cost of equipment and resources making it prohibitive. So I just wondered, was there an estimation of what those costs would be to do it, you know, in-house, and how prohibitive it would have been? Yeah.
Not specifically, but what I would say is that we don't have the capacity to do this with our existing team and our existing equipment, so we would have to bring in additional people and also buy new equipment versus using this operator that would then go away and potentially do work for, let's say, the university or the hospital as soon as it's finished this work, so they're able to spread the cost of their equipment and people over multiple contracts. It would be more expensive for us to do it, is our assessment of it at this time.
Right. Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you.
I think that kind of makes sense, doesn't it, in terms of, it's like the farming sector with a combine harvester, you know, is shared between a number of, and in this case we are sharing that. Yes. Yeah. So, we are moving on to the recommendations for this report. So if you could outline those, Ruth, if you can get hold of them.
Yes, I can. The committee is recommended to note the contents of the report, approve the increase in the contract value to enable award of the hedge maintenance contract following completion of the procurement process, and approve the award of the contract for an initial 3-year period with the option to extend for a further year in accordance with the report. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is, are we all agreed? Thank you. Thank you, folks. Okay. Right, so I'm just checking on form of words for extending the meeting for another half an hour, but hoping that that won't be necessary. But just in case we overrun into after 12:30. So I'm seeking the permission of the approval of the committee to extend by half an hour, if necessary. Right, no dissent, okay, right. We'll move on to the last item. So, this is the POL performance report, pages 533 to 554. So the committee here has been asked to note the performance report for 2025-26 and confirm that the proposed measures remain appropriate for performance reporting during 26-27 year. The report provides the committee's annual overview of performance across parks, leisure, libraries and bereavement services. So 4 areas there. It highlights key achievements, identifies areas where further improvement is needed, setting out priorities that will be monitored during the coming year. The notes I have is that the report presents a positive picture. Key achievements include successful mobilisation of a new leisure contract, growth in participation across leisure services, improvements in the quality of parks and green spaces, strong biodiversity and tree planting performance, growth in digital library use and progress on the various cremation and cemetery services strategies. The report also is transparent about areas where improvement is needed, including customer satisfaction at some parks, physical library visits and borrowing, complaint response times, and maintaining participation levels during service changes. I won't identify the key messages. I'll leave each service area to do that if they need to do. There are several priorities for 26-27 year, including the transfer of Graves, Thorncliffe and Wisewood into the Everyone Active contract, increasing participation amongst underrepresented communities, identified by several of us during the day, improving complaint response times, increasing library use, and continuing our progress on biodiversity, on quality of parks and bereavement services improvements. So if I'm not sure how we're going to be dealing with this. I think it might be just you, Ruth, who's going to speak to this. Yeah. So please do, and then we'll ask for questions from members.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll speak to it, although 2 of my colleagues are sat over there, so I might throw them under the bus if you've got any specific questions, if that's okay. So I'll try and keep this fairly brief, assuming that you've all read the report, because I do appreciate that we are at time. So as already mentioned, the report provides the committee with its annual overview of performance across parks, leisure and libraries and bereavement services during 25-26. And as already stated, performance has been positive across most areas of the portfolio. There are a number of significant achievements which the Chair has already gone through, but also the report is quite transparent about where there is more work to do. I won't go through the list that was just identified, but I'll talk about each service individually if that's okay. So, leisure services, 25-26 was the first full year of operation under the new Everyone Active contract. Overall performance was strong, with growth in participation, fitness membership, swimming lessons and community outreach activity. Peak attendance exceeded 650,000 visits during Q2, and membership attrition remained below recognised national benchmarks. The contract also delivered significant community benefit through outreach activity, holiday programmes, targeted intervention aimed at increasing participation among underrepresented groups, and more than 2,000 children and young people participated in holiday activity programmes throughout the year. I think it's important to say that Q4 data is not yet available, but that will be confirmed through the annual review process. Alongside the Everyone Active contract, the Council continued to work with Places Leisure at the sites Graves, Thorncliffe and Wisewood. Participation has remained strong across all those 3 sites, and the work is already underway to transfer those facilities into the Everyone Active contract in September 2026, and at the moment that programme is on schedule. There are some challenges remaining around waiting lists, congestion in junior gym provision and the ageing condition of some fitness equipment, which do continue to be monitored through contract management arrangements. Parks and Countryside delivered a strong year of performance. We've spoken about quality across our sites. The Sheffield standard exceeded target with 89% of assessed sites meeting the Sheffield standard against a target of 88% this year. And that 1% might not sound like a lot, but we are into the final sort of 10-12% of getting sites up to that Sheffield standard, and it's important to state that they are the hardest sites to bring up to that standard. Performance also exceeded targets for biodiversity management and tree planting. More than 10,000 trees were planted during the year, supported by community engagement and volunteering activity across the city. The service maintained its portfolio of 18 green flags, and as already stated in this meeting today, we have now received confirmation that the Shirebrook Valley site has become the 19th green flag site following the recently completed species survival project in that part of the city. The main area requiring attention within Parks and Countryside is customer satisfaction. Satisfaction remains positive overall at 78%, but that has reduced compared to previous years, and we are undertaking work to try and improve that and understand exactly what is happening and why. Libraries and archives had a mixed but generally positive year. Physical visits and book borrowing reduced slightly compared with the previous year, which it reflects factors such as building relocation, some service disruption and changing customer behaviour, but overall use of library services does remain strong. And one of the strongest areas of performance was digital borrowing. E-library usage increased significantly during the year, demonstrating a growing demand for digital services and reflecting the work that's been undertaken by the service to improve the digital offer. The key focus for the coming year will be increasing physical visits and borrowing, whilst also continuing to grow the digital services and making the best use of the library spaces that we have and the public computers that exist within those spaces. Bereavement services, its biggest achievement during the year was the development and approval of the Cremation and Cemetery Services Strategy 2025 to 2050, massive piece of work looking at the next 25 years of operation. The strategy provides a long-term framework for future provision and was informed by one of the Council's largest public consultations, receiving almost 3,000 responses from members of the public. Alongside the strategy work, the service continues to focus on customer experience, future burial capacity planning and engagement with faith and community groups to ensure that the services remain inclusive and responsive to the needs of Sheffield's residents and those changing needs as well. The report includes an overview of complaints performance across the whole of parks, leisure and libraries. There were a total of 90 stage 1 complaints, 34 stage 2 complaints, so relatively low levels of escalation. Performance at stage 2 remains strong, with 91% of complaints responded to within the target timescales, but stage 1 complaints are below target levels, with only 57% of complaints responded to within that target time. This remains an important area of focus for the coming year, and additional management oversight arrangements are now in place to look at that, understand what's happening and improve it for the following year. The report also highlights progress against recommendations from the Sheffield Race Equality Commission. Leisure Library and Park Services have continued to target work with Leisure Library, Parks and Bereavement Services have continued to target work with underrepresented communities, and early evidence shows increasing participation from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities within leisure services. Reducing inequalities in participation and access will be a key priority throughout 26-27. The priorities for 26-27 were already highlighted by the Chair, but I will repeat it as it is really important. The report identifies 6 key priorities for the coming year. Successfully transferring Graves, Thorncliffe, Wise and Wisewood into the Everyone Active contract. Increasing participation amongst underrepresented communities, improving stage 1 complaint response times, maintaining progress against the Sheffield Standard and biodiversity targets, increasing physical library visits and physical borrowing, and also delivering the Cremation and Cemetery Services Strategy. Thank you.
Right. So thank you, Ruth. I've got a question first, which is 57% of stage 1 complaints isn't good enough, really, and you know that and you've acknowledged that. So how's that going to be tackled specifically, do you think, Ruth? Does it need more officers?
It's really easy to say it needs more officers, and yes, of course, more resource and more officers would be absolutely fantastic, not just for improving response times to complaints, but actually what I think it needs is a focus on doing two things. Number one, prioritising complaints when they come in, and number two, actually putting the information when we've spoken to customers onto the system, just actually picking up the phone and speaking to a customer, because an awful lot can be resolved very quickly without the need to go much further through the formal process. It needs to be a priority. It needs to be prioritised by all officers as complaints come in. I do think it's really important to say that the complaints system captures a lot of complaints, but not all complaints. I know in my area there's an awful lot that just come into people's inbox and are just dealt with as they come in. But actually we do know the value of speaking to people very quickly, understanding their problem, and trying to resolve it as best we can, as quickly as we can.
So thank you. So I think you're talking about some kind of triaging system, whereas in some it's prioritised as to, you know, where does it go and what level does this possibly need to go to?
I think there could be benefit to that. I think also just reminding officers that complaints are really important, and actually they're not something else that you need to get to in your inbox. They are something that you need to prioritise, because we all work for the residents of Sheffield.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said in another meeting, when I first met the triaging system through the health service, it was just really annoying, because you'd have to sit down and you'd have to wait your turn to be dealt with at reception. But then you realise the benefits of it, because you are directed to the right place. Yeah. Okay, what I'm going to do is, I think there are 4 areas here, aren't there? So I'm going to ask for each one in turn for questions from people. So I'm going to start with Parks and Countryside, since you're sat there, Ruth. So have you got any questions on the Parks and Countryside performance figures? Anyone? And if not, we'll move on. Yes? Okay. So has anyone got anything to say about the leisure aspects? Leisure. Okay. Library services. Okay. Bereavement services. 4 down, 1 to go. So I'm going to ask about. I've already mentioned about complaints, but you know, if anyone has anything to say about the complaint system, Councillor Zahir and Naz.
It's not a question, actually. It's just a comment. Obviously, all of the areas that need improvement are concerning, but it looks like we're on top of it. So we know what the concerns are, and there is work being done to address those concerns. And this is why I've not asked any questions around it, because I was satisfied with the response in terms of how you're going to look into them.
Okay, if there's no one else, I'm going to say that, you know, I'm going to keep an eye on KPIs this year, key performance indicators, you know, how we do, tell us how services are performing and also improving. So that'll be a priority for me. So please flag anything up that, you know, you as members think is not being dealt with, or you think something's slipping through the net in whatever way, and I can raise it with you and other folks within the CPL range, such as Tom, etc. Yes. Okay. I think we need to move on to approving this, if it's approved. Is there a form of words that you've got there that you can read out that we're approving or not approving?
Yeah, I have. So the report states that the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee is recommended to note the performance report update for 25-26 and confirm these measures as appropriate for reporting the 26-27 performance. Thank you.
So are we all agreed? I think that's agreement. Okay, that's good. Right then. I've run out of notes. I think we're about finished. Is there anything I've missed out, Amanda? No. Could you give us the date and time of the next meeting? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, so we were 14th September. Is it morning or afternoon? Do you know? Okay. It gets varied, doesn't it? Sometimes it's morning, sometimes it's afternoon. So afternoon meeting. I'll thank you for all your support. And 2 p.m. is the time that I've been given. So thank you very much for all your support. And we'll see you in the next briefing, whenever that is. And see you at the next CPR. Thank you.